Hey everybody, this is Tracy here with another edition of A View from Tracy's Point. And today we are doing a quick review of Oprah Winfrey's movie that aired last night on HBO, which was titled The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. And if you guys know anything about the book, it was written, I think it came out in 2010 or late 2009, but it was one of Oprah's book club book of the month, and I think it stayed on the New York Times bestseller list for like 6 years or something like that. So I had never read the book before, really didn't have much interest in reading the book, and then a few weeks ago one of my girlfriends was planning a monthly get together, and she was saying how the movie was coming out on HBO, but she didn't have HBO, but she thought it would have been a good thing, everybody come over and watch the movie and then we talk about the movie afterwards. But she doesn't have HBO and we never put the whole thing together. Well, it turned out that if you are a DirecTV subscriber, they offered HBO free over the weekend, so I decided to check the movie out. So let's see how I can put this. You guys ever been in a relationship and like the first 3 or 4 months is really exciting and you have these really great moments and you can't stop thinking about the person, and then at the end of 12, 13 weeks, and all of a sudden you try to call him and he's not answering the phone, he's not returning your phone calls, and then you're out one day and you see him with another woman and you realize that you had been bamboozled. Well, that's kind of how I felt watching this movie. Well, not even watching the movie, that's how I felt at the end of the movie, because Oprah had like these great monologues and it was like all, deep and everything. And then there were moments, like when she would have memories of her mom and you think like, oh my God, how sweet and sentimental, and then, the whole country scene, because most of us that live in the South either are from the country or we spent our summers in the country with our grandparents. So it was like an emotional roller coaster watching the movie. And then it came, like, I was thinking probably at the 90-minute mark, I said, okay, so where's she going with this? Like, how long is this movie? So I checked the guide and it said that the movie goes off at 10 o'clock. So I said, okay, so what are they going to do in the next 30 minutes? Well, the movie didn't end in the next 30 minutes. It ended in like the next 5 minutes. And Rebecca Skloot, who actually wrote the book, she's trying to let Oprah's character, Deborah Lacks, know that, the book is being published and that she's gotten the cover for the book and all this stuff. And Deborah isn't returning the phone calls. And then she finally goes to the town, and then we're getting like these flashbacks or intermittent scenes where 1 minute it's on Rebecca and the next minute it's on Oprah's character, and Oprah's like in the bed and she's seems to be in distress. So anyway, the movie ends. Oprah died in her sleep and she never got to see the book published. So it was very anticlimactic at best. I was just like, okay, I need that hour and 30 minutes back. Sort of how when you have that relationship I was talking about and you're like, okay, I need them 3 months of my life back because I didn't get what I was expecting out of this. So if you guys know the story of Henrietta Lacks, it's about a black woman, a poor black woman during the 40s, I think it is, that developed cervical cancer. And she went to Johns Hopkins, which had like a charity hospital that treated black people. And so they took a sample of the tumor that was growing on her cervix, and they were experimenting with trying to find research cells using cancer cells. And they had tried before and none of them took, but Henrietta's own did take, and then they started multiplying and multiplying and multiplying. And I think they said it's like in the trillions of cells that have been harvested from that one little piece of her tumor that they took out. And so the whole story of her is that she never knew that Johns Hopkins was, had taken her cells and were using them in research. It turned into like a really profitable business, and her cells are like all over the world right now, and they're being used in research projects. So Johns Hopkins made a whole bunch of money off of this woman and her her sales that they took, but she was never compensated. And of course, she passed away shortly after. And I think she died when she was 31. And then her family never knew about it, so they were never compensated for it. And I'm sure, you guys know about the Tuskegee experiment and some other experiments where they were just using poor black people as guinea pigs back then, and probably still do today. And so I guess what I was expecting from this movie was to learn more about, Henrietta Lacks and who she was, and how the whole story transformed, like what happened with those cells, how were the cells used. Maybe they incorporated some people who actually benefited from the research. We didn't get any of that. So Oprah's focus on this movie was the daughter Deborah, who was I think she was the youngest girl. So Henrietta had 5 children. And I think Oprah was the youngest girl, but the youngest of all the kids may have been a little boy. I'm not sure. But anyway, Oprah played the daughter Deborah, and once again she's doing one of these movies where from the Women of Brewster's Place, Sophie from The Color Purple, Beloved's mother and the movie Beloved, like they all just have those same eerily similarities to them. And so I just guess Oprah likes playing those kind of roles, and this was just another one. And the movie was kind of confusing because, like I said, Oprah did these great monologues, and her interaction with Rebecca, who was the white woman that was writing the book, they were, kind of interesting. And so she did a powerful performance. It just didn't all go together for me. And then she had some kind of disability that was, in some places, seemed like she was overacting. And then in other places, it was normal. It seemed like, okay, this could be realistic. And then I couldn't tell if she was supposed to have like some type of mental disability or if she had a learning disability, because in some scenes she seemed like she might have been kind of slow mentally and challenged, and then in other scenes she seemed like a very intellectual woman. And so it was just the array of I don't know, maybe she was manic depressive, and so when she was kind of more humble and tame, that was in the depressed state, and then when she was all over the place, that was in the manic state. There were a few funny parts in the movie, like when Oprah first met Rebecca and they went to this restaurant, and Oprah came in there, was spraying the Lysol in the chair and talking loud and everything. And so throughout the whole movie, Rebecca was acting kind of shell shocked, like she had never experienced anything like this. And I thought it was interesting, because the movie was set in Baltimore, that when they finally, were able to meet up, she came to town and she was like parked under this bridge. And then when Deborah's brother came to pick her up, she thought she was going to follow him. And no, he wanted her to get in the car. Then he takes her to the projects where, Deborah lived, but then told her she had to figure out which one of the apartments it was that she was going to. And then she got out the car and he just drove off and left her. And so to me, she must have really wanted that story, because I thought that was a little unrealistic. But, obviously that's the way it happened. And then I thought it was also funny how whenever Deborah would take Rebecca, like to meet some of the family members, or when they went to the mental institution, like anytime they would go somewhere, Deborah would drive her car and Rebecca would be in her car following her. I thought that was kind of odd and funny. The whole idea of the book came from Rebecca Skloot, and she was a scientist, a scientific writer, I believe, and she had heard about these, I think they're called HeLa, for Henrietta Lacks, HeLa cells. And so she was hearing about those cells, and she found out that there wasn't much history on Henrietta Lacks, the woman who had, whose cells they belonged to. And so she decided to write this book, on Henrietta Lacks. But the family didn't want to talk about it. They didn't trust, her. They didn't trust the hospital. They didn't trust the government. And so she decided, to get them to help her, which she eventually did, get Deborah to help her, write the story. And it was just so much going on. But the saddest part about the story is that the family was very poor, and then they were suffering from like high blood pressure and all this different stuff. And, you know, like I said, some kind of mental illness was going on there. They have a sister who was in a mental hospital and she ended up dying there. And while she was in the mental institution, you know, they were experimenting on her as well. And then when I was doing my research for this recap, because like I said, I didn't read the book, so you guys are probably wondering, why the hell you know all this? So I did do my research before doing this. But basically, Henrietta Lacks' her mother died, and the father sent her. They had 10 kids, I think it was, and then the kids got separated amongst family members, which is very common, you know, back then with black families. And so Henrietta went to live, I think it was with the grandfather, but then she ended up having a relationship with one of her cousins when she was like 13 or however, you know, they were, I guess he was probably molesting her if she was that young. But anyway, they ended up having a baby and eventually getting married. And then when they had their second child, which was their daughter Elsie, Henrietta had contracted syphilis, and then the syphilis wasn't treated because I think they said she had stopped taking her treatment, and then that caused issues with Elsie because then she also had the syphilis, congenital syphilis, and then epilepsy. So she ended up in this mental institution that was kind of like forgotten about. And so in the movie, one of the things that Deborah, who was played by Oprah, made Rebecca, the writer, promise her was that she would include Elsie's life in the book. And so they did end up going to the mental institution where Elsie spent most of her life and, you know, getting information, her autopsy, and then that's how they found out, you know, how she died and that she was pretty much tortured while she was there. But all of that said and done, there was just so many dynamics to this story that could have been put into, well, not even a movie, because so many times when you have instances that have actually taken place, it's hard to, you know, put all that together in a 2-hour movie, or in this case, a hour and a half movie. So you end up taking one piece of the story and trying to make the movie out of that and cram all this information into it. And I just think that Oprah missed the mark on this one. And I was reading the New York Times, I think it was, that did a review. Yes, I believe it was their review. And they were basically saying that this would have been better for like a 6 to 8 part series, mini series that aired on regular television than trying to make it into a movie. And then I don't have no idea why it was on HBO, because now you're limiting your audience. And she probably could have aired this on the OWN network. So I'm sure it was something financial behind all of this for that decision. But basically, didn't Oprah, you know, like I said, had a very good, powerful performance. I will give her credit for that. I just think that this was too important of a story to have gotten lost in the way she portrayed the movie, because at the end of the movie, we really had no resolution. We had no answers. All we had was some bylines that ran, you know, when the screen faded to black, that let us know that Deborah died, you know, before the book was published. So even though she had helped Rebecca write the story, she didn't get to see the fruits of her labor. And we learned that the family was never compensated, you know, for the cells that were used by Johns Hopkins and are now all over the world. So I don't know. It was just a movie that just, I don't know, just something for her to do. If I had to rate it on a scale of 1 to 5, I think I would probably give it a 3. And I thought one of the really important things was when Deborah would discover some information or read something, or somebody would say something that was like an aha moment, she would have these memories. And then by the end of the movie, I was wondering, like, was the memory real, or was it just a memory that she was conjuring up in her mind based on the information that she had just received? Because then I think she was 3 years old when the mom passed away, but then she suddenly could remember being at the funeral, you know, and then she remembered being at the cemetery, and she would just have like these different flashbacks. So I was like, okay, so did this stuff really happen, or is she manifesting these images in her mind, of her mother because she wants to believe these things? So that was kind of confusing to me on a couple of ends. And then they just like, so even with them doing the whole Deborah as the main piece of the movie, like we really didn't learn a lot about her, because I believe in the book she actually met a guy that was abusive to her. She was married in the book. She had the 2 kids, and they didn't focus on any of that in the movie. And so, like, bottom line, it was just hard to make this into a movie. And, it was one of the things that I said to my girlfriend before I watched the show. I said, I hope Oprah doesn't piss off another author by messing up their book. And I'm not saying that she messed the book up. I'm just saying that I didn't personally, this viewer, this watcher, didn't take away from the movie that it was like this great movie. It was just mediocre at best. And I just felt that so many different approaches could have been taken to tell this story and really give us the information that we needed. And Oprah just didn't do that for me. Well, that is it for me, guys. If you watched the movie or read the book, let me know what you thought about either one or both. Leave your comments below, rate the video, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And until the next time, I will talk to you guys later. Take care. Bye-bye.